You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network, sponsored by MLGW, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. As always, DC sitting here right along with a very capable co-host, Doc Ward. Doc, how are you again this evening, sir?
I'm more than capable.
More than capable. We are visiting this evening with Paulo Nunes-Ueno, who happens to be a wonderfully talented expert on sustainable transportation and effective urban solutions based in Seattle. Welcome to Funky Politics there, Paulo. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
First of all, why don't you talk a little bit about what you've done and what your history has been?
I've worked my whole career really on helping cities figure out how to implement an effective transportation solution, whether that's transit, whether it's parking, whether it's thinking about how to accommodate and integrate the new transportation technologies like Uber and Lyft and other things. Bikes are also have been part of my portfolio. But really, this question of infrastructure is big because, these problems are going to be with us for years and years and years, and we need to be able to have lasting solutions to providing options for people to drive less. But before we really start talking about big infrastructure investments, I think, we folks that work in transportation across the country, what we see is that we need to get folks talking about the difficult conversation. Like America, every single city in America has a bus system.
Right.
But mostly they have the bus system that they had in the 1930s because it's hard to make changes. It's hard to get the political will together to upgrade those routes. Nobody remembers that we had to deviate this one route because this one church asked for this deviation and they don't do the Sunday dinner anymore.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Go ahead, Paulo.
And so what's important, before we get distracted with, and I'm not saying, look, don't get me wrong, we need the light rail, we need the heavy rail lines. I've spent some time in Japan. I love the bullet trains. We need to invest in those things. But before we do all of that, we need to look at the service that we're running today and ask ourselves, does this still match the population centers that we have? Does it match the job centers that we have? What can we do to make the buses easier to use?
Well, can you do this? Can you talk a little bit about, because I get it 100%, about how important it is that a transit system in any major city is not just looked at as a means for people that can't afford cars or people that are economically disadvantaged to get from point A to point B. A true effective bus system is one that serves the community and actually becomes a symbol or an opportunity for growth for everybody from all classes. Can you talk a little about, because I think the stigma, the first thing when people don't want to move forward is that they stigmatize what buses are about. Because as you said, historically, and let's just be real with it, the bus system was a manner of getting people from, getting black people from their neighborhood to go serve white people in their homes and be home workers and gardeners and all these other things. But it's much more than that now with these changing times. So can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of it, about how important it is for a good road or bus transit system to work that benefits the entire community?
Well, I think that we neglect our bus systems to our peril, really, because a good, effective transportation system, and it starts with having the backbone of a bus network that works and serves everybody in the community, like you're saying. You know what that is? That's ultimately the sign of a healthy community. There's so many statistics that link transit-oriented communities and transit-oriented lifestyles to these negative health outcomes. So what I keep saying is that, we have to think about where we get our healthy food. We need to think about access to healthy activities. And we need to think about access to public transportation as one of the three pillars of public health. So,
wow.
Go
ahead, I'm sorry.
I like the way that you framed this picture of, it's part of a history of neglect of communities where we've neglected communities because of racism, because of exclusion, and all kinds of other things. And public transportation suffers from that stigma, and we need to change that and say this is a core part of being a healthy community.
Paulo, let me ask you another quick question regarding the busing piece. But I guess some of the larger cities I've been in our country, they have a very dependable. Let's just say they have a supporting system with light rail.
Right.
And so I think in some of these the southern cities in the South, like the Jackson, Mississippi's, Memphis, Tennessee's, and some of the St. Louis, Missouri, you don't see that light rail piece. So maybe I don't know, maybe that bus system is, like you said, it's just antiquated, but that's what it was there for, as Marcus was saying, to get folks out to the suburban parts of the community so they could do day labor work, basically, or I guess homework, working in folks' home.
Yeah. But again, what I would say is we need to keep our eyes focused and say we need the bus system to work for today's needs and for the city of today, and make those difficult choices and educate the community about what those choices are, and put that system into place, and then go out and ask folks for more money to build an expensive system that's going to, by definition, serve a limited population.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
So how do you do that? What's the prescription for getting that bus system to create this healthy community that we've been talking about?
Well, I think that the start really is to understand what's not working about it today. That a lot of times when you look and you go and you visit a city, what you see is a bunch of spaghetti that's thrown over the city map. Mm-hmm. And literally people don't remember why these routes are designed the way that they are, because they're from 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, but it's really politically difficult, because there's a vocal constituency that will fight and get really riled up if you change one or two routes. And so over time, people get very entrenched in the agency side in sort of keeping this. I haven't looked in great detail at the Memphis system, so this is not a criticism of what's going on there necessarily. But in a lot of towns, what you have is a bunch of zombie routes that don't really make any sense anymore. Mm. And so you need to, and yet if you go one by one, it's a difficult conversation with the public. So you need to have a larger vision so that you can go out and have something that people can say yes to. They say, all right, all of these routes are going to change. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to understand what's possible with the current amount of money that we have. Do we want to cover more and more parts of the city with very infrequent service, or do we want to cover? You might want to start that again, because I've got.
That's okay. That's one of those pieces we had. We good. Keep on going, man. We gotta have kids. Yeah. We all got them.
So what you're faced with really is coming up with a large vision that's positive, that people can say yes to, and give up some of the things that they think that they need to fight tooth and nail to keep, that may not be working altogether that well today.
Well, you were speaking about the zombie routes, and I think from looking at it from an urban standpoint here in the South, especially in some of the cities I've been in, I think you're right. But how, like the political will? You talk about the political will. How many board of commissioners of these transit authorities are willing to make that type of decision? Say, look, that doesn't work anymore. If you've got an effective route, and it only carries about 25 persons between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. at night, then we may need to look at doing something different. But that route's been around for 50 years, though.
Right.
So who comes up with the will to say, hey, look, it's time to do something different? I guess it's leadership, though, right? From the top.
It is leadership. Yeah, it is leadership, but there's a process. Yeah. That there's a process of engaging the public in conversation about what is transit for, how can we make it better, what do people want, and then there's a process of engaging with transit planners to design alternatives and actually look at them. And I think what happens often, though, is that we get distracted by the shiny object. We think this system is too hard to fix, so we're going to throw a light rail line on top of it, or we're gonna do one bus rapid transit line on it without looking at the system as a whole. And sometimes what happens there is that generates a lot of resentment, because we're creating a two-tiered system that some neighborhoods are getting all of the love. They're getting this fancy new bus or this billion-dollar light rail line, and everybody else is still stuck in traffic with the old bus.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Okay, listen up. This is Samuel L. Jackson, and I want to talk to you about energy conservation. If your idea of energy conservation is sitting in a hammock underneath a tree, then I'm talking to you. I want you to weather strip around the windows and doors. Use compact fluorescent light bulbs. Repair leaky faucets and toilets. Don't waste energy. Don't make me have to come to your house and inspect it. Call 544-MLGW or go to MLGW.com and tell them Samuel L. Jackson sent you.